A man was abandoned in the rain on a dark highway. But 5 minutes later, a Rolls-Royce stopped. And what happened next would change his life forever. On a stormy night along I-85, Darius Coleman was thrown out of a car with nothing. No phone, no wallet, just the weight of humiliation pressing down on him. But 5 minutes later, a Rolls-Royce pulled over, and the woman inside seemed to know everything about him. That night wasn't just betrayal. It was the beginning of a truth that could take his son away, or change his life forever. The rain came down like it had something to prove. Sheets of water slammed against the asphalt of Interstate 85, turning the long stretch of highway into a dark, glassy river. Headlights streaked past in blurred lines, white and yellow cutting through the storm, before vanishing into the night again. The sound of tires slicing through water echoed in waves, rising and falling like a restless heartbeat. Darius Coleman stood on the shoulder, soaked to the bone. For a few seconds, he didn't move. He just stared. The red taillights of Angela's SUV faded in the distance, shrinking into two tiny dots before disappearing completely into the storm. One moment, he had been sitting in that passenger seat, trying to keep his voice steady, trying to have a conversation about their son. The next, the door had been shoved open, her voice cold and sharp as the rain itself. "Get out, Darius." He thought she was bluffing. He had turned to her, confused, searching her face for something, anything, familiar. But though there was nothing there, no hesitation, no anger even, just calm certainty. And then she had leaned across him, pushed the door wider, and said it again. "Get out. You're holding him back." The memory hit him now like another wave of cold water. Darius blinked hard, rain dripping from his eyelashes. His chest felt tight, like something inside him had been twisted too far and hadn't snapped back yet. He reached instinctively for his pockets, empty. His phone was still in the center console, his wallet, glove compartment. Even his jacket lay crumpled in the back seat, right where he had tossed it earlier when the heat in the car had gotten too warm. She had driven away with all of it, with everything. A car roared past, too close, spraying a fresh burst of water up his legs. He flinched, stepping back toward the guardrail, boots slipping slightly on the slick gravel. The cold finally started to settle in. It crept through his clothes, into his skin, down to his bones. But it wasn't just the rain. It was the realization that began to take shape, slow and heavy. This wasn't an argument. It wasn't a bad night. Angela didn't do things without a reason. He knew that better than anyone. Darius turned his head, scanning the road behind him. Nothing but darkness and distant lights. No gas station, no diner, no exit sign within walking distance. Just miles of highway stretching out in both directions, indifferent and endless. His throat tightened. "Malik," he murmured under his breath. The name came out softer than he expected. Their son, 8 years old, smart, quiet, too observant for his age, the kind of kid who watched everything and said less than he should. Lately, he'd been different, careful, like he was measuring every word before he spoke, making sure it wouldn't cause another argument between his parents. Like he already understood something Darius had been trying to ignore, that things were falling apart. Darius dragged a hand over his face, wiping away water that instantly returned. He tried to steady his breathing, but every inhale felt shallow, uneven. Why tonight? That question encircled in his mind, louder than the storm. Why now? She had asked him to meet. Said they needed to talk about Malik. Said it would be better if they handled things like adults. And he had believed her. Of course he had. Because despite everything, some part of him still thought they could figure it out. That if he stayed calm, stayed reasonable, stayed patient, things would settle. That was always his mistake. Another car passed, slower this time, its headlights briefly illuminating him. Just a man standing alone in the rain, soaked, unmoving, before it continued on, invisible again. Darius swallowed hard. He took a step forward, then another. The gravel crunched under his boots, the sound barely audible under the pounding rain. Each step felt heavy, like he was dragging something behind him. Years of trying to keep peace. Years of letting things slide. Angela's voice echoed in his head. "You're not stable enough, Darius. He needs structure. He needs someone who's actually moving forward." He clenched his jaw. Not stable enough. The words had been building for months, maybe longer. Little comments here and there. The way she talked about his job, about his schedule, about the apartment, about him, and now, this. He stopped walking. A thought hit him, sudden and sharp. This was planned, the way she had waited, the way she hadn't raised her voice, the way she had made sure he left everything behind, even the location, middle of nowhere. No witnesses, no easy way back. Darius turned slowly, looking down the stretch of road again, rain stinging his face. His stomach dropped. If this was planned, then it didn't end here. Whatever came next, she had already set it in motion. A pair of headlights appeared in the distance behind him. At first, he barely paid attention. Just another car, he figured. Another driver who wouldn't stop, wouldn't even really see him. The lights grew brighter, closer. But something was different. The car wasn't speeding past like the others. It was slowing down. Darius narrowed his eyes, trying to see through the rain. The shape of the vehicle came into view. Long, sleek, almost gliding over the wet road instead of cutting through it. Expensive. Too expensive for this stretch of highway. The engine was quiet, smooth. Not the rough growl of a truck or the high-pitched whine of a small car. Something deeper, controlled. The car pulled alongside him, a black Rolls-Royce Phantom. For a second, Darius just stood there, frozen. Water dripped from his hair, ran down his face, soaked into the collar of his shirt. He didn't move, didn't step closer, didn't step away. The rear window lowered slowly. Inside, the warm glow of soft lighting revealed a woman seated in the back. White, silver hair pulled neatly back. A dark coat draped over her shoulders like it belonged in a different world entirely. One untouched by rain or cold or anything messy. Her eyes settled on him, sharp, steady, unreadable. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look concerned. She looked certain. "Get in, Darius Coleman," she said calmly. The sound of his name cut through the storm. Darius felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. His brow furrowed, confusion flashing across his face. He started, but the words caught in his throat. He took a step back instead. "How do you, if you stay out here," the woman continued, her voice even, almost gentle. "You won't just lose tonight." A pause. The rain filled the space between her words. "You'll lose your son." Darius's breath hitched. Something inside him tightened, sharp and immediate. She hadn't asked who he was. She hadn't introduced herself. And somehow, she knew exactly which words would make him stop running. The storm roared around them. The highway stretched on, empty and dark. Darius stood there, soaked, trembling slightly. Not from the cold anymore, but from something deeper. Every instinct told him to walk away, to demand answers, to not get into a car with a stranger who knew too much. But another voice, quieter, heavier, whispered something else. If she knows this much, what else does she know? The car door clicked, unlocked. The woman's gaze never left him. 5 more minutes out here," she said softly, "and you won't be able to fix what's coming." Darius looked down the road, then back at her. Rain dripped from his fingertips, pooling at his feet. For the first time since the SUV disappeared, he felt something shift. Not hope, not yet, but a question. And it was louder than the storm. Why did she want him to get in? Darius didn't move right away. The rain kept falling, hard and steady, drumming against the roof of the Rolls-Royce. running in streams down the polished black surface. The warmth from inside the car drifted toward him through the open door, carrying the faint scent of leather and something clean, expensive, something that didn't belong on a highway shoulder like this. He swallowed. His hands were shaking now, but not just from the cold. His mind was racing, trying to catch up with everything that had happened in the last 5 minutes, trying to make sense of it. Angela's voice echoed again, sharp and final. "You're holding him back." That hadn't been anger, that had been a decision. Darius lifted his head slowly, his eyes locking onto the woman inside the car again. She hadn't moved, not an inch. She just watched him, patient in a way that made him uneasy. Most people would have said more by now, asked questions, offered help. She hadn't. She'd just given him a choice, and somehow, she already knew which one mattered. His jaw tightened. "You said I'd lose my son," he said, his voice rough from the cold and something deeper. "What do you mean by that?" The woman tilted her head slightly, as if weighing whether he was ready to hear the answer. "Exactly what it sounds like," she replied. No hesitation, no softening, just truth. Darius took a slow step closer, rain dripping from his sleeves, pooling beneath his boots. "That doesn't answer anything." "No," she said calmly. "It answers everything. You just don't understand it yet." That hit him harder than he expected. For a second, irritation flared up, sharp, defensive. He had spent years being talked down to, years being told he didn't see the bigger picture, that he wasn't thinking ahead, that he needed to catch up. He almost stepped back, almost walked away, but then Malik's face came to him again, clear as day, the way his son had been quiet at dinner last week. The way he'd kept glancing between his parents like he was trying to read something neither of them were saying out loud. The way he'd asked, just 2 nights ago, "Dad, if people live in different places, is that still a family?" Darius closed his eyes for half a second. That wasn't a random question. None of this was random. His eyes opened again, sharper now. "You're saying Angela planned this," he said slowly. The woman didn't answer right away. The rain filled the silence again, thick and constant. Finally, she spoke. "I'm saying people like Angela don't improvise when the stakes are this high." Darius felt something cold settle in his chest. People like Angela. That wasn't just a comment. That was a category. He ran a hand over his face, dragging water down his cheeks. "What kind of stakes?" he asked. The woman leaned back slightly in her seat, her posture still composed, still controlled. "Cut," she said. The word landed heavy. Darius didn't respond immediately. He just stared at her, his mind replaying everything from the past few months, every conversation, every argument that hadn't felt like an argument at the time. Angela asking about his work schedule more often, Angela mentioning school districts, Angela casually bringing up stability. At the time, it had all seemed normal. Now it didn't. "You don't know her," he said. But even as the words left his mouth, they felt weaker than they should have. The woman's eyes didn't waver. "I know patterns," she replied. "And I know what happens when someone starts building a narrative before the other person realizes there's a story being written." Darius's stomach tightened. A narrative. That's what this felt like something had already been decided, and he was just now walking into the middle of it. "She left me out here," he said, his voice dropping. "No phone, no wallet, nothing." "Yes, you think that's about custody?" "I think," the woman said carefully, "it's about positioning." Darius frowned. "For what?" She leaned forward slightly now, just enough that the light inside the car caught her face more clearly. "For the version of you she's going to present." The words hung there. Darius felt them settle into place, one by one. Version of you, not who you are, what she can show. His breath slowed, but his heart started pounding harder. "If I call her right now," he said, thinking out loud. "You won't," the woman cut in. He blinked. "And why not?" "Because you don't have your phone," she said simply. "And even if you did, it would be the worst thing you could do." Darius stared at her. "That doesn't make sense." "It will." Another pause. The rain softened for a moment, just enough to hear the distant hum of traffic again. The woman glanced out the window briefly, then back at him. "If you call her angry," she continued, "if you send anything that sounds unstable, frustrated, desperate, she keeps it, screenshots it, files it." Darius felt his chest tighten again. "And if I don't, she tells the story anyway." Silence. There it was, the trap. He could almost see it now, laid out in front of him, every reaction, every move, already accounted for. His shoulders slumped slightly. "I didn't see any of this coming," he said quietly. "No," the woman replied. "You didn't." There was no judgment in her voice. That somehow made it worse. Darius let out a breath, long and uneven. "I was trying to keep things calm," he added. "For Malik. I didn't want him caught in the middle." The woman studied him for a moment. "And how has that worked out for you?" The question wasn't cruel, but it cut deep. Darius didn't answer because he didn't have one. The rain picked up again, louder now, filling the space between them. He looked down at his hands, wet, empty, shaking slightly, and for the first time that night, something shifted inside him. Not fear, not confusion, something sharper, awareness. He had been reacting, letting things happen, letting her set the pace, define the terms, control the tone, and now he was standing on the side of a highway with nothing, trying to figure out how it got this far. Slowly, he looked back up. "Who are you?" he asked again. This time, there was less resistance in his voice, more focus. The woman held his gaze for a moment longer, then gave a small nod, like he had just crossed some invisible line. "My name is Eleanor Whitmore," she said. The name didn't mean anything to him. Not yet. Darius shifted his weight, glancing down the road again, then back at the open car door. The cold was starting to creep deeper now, making his fingers stiff, his shoulders tense. He could stand out here longer, try to figure things out on his own, or he could step into a situation he didn't understand, with someone who clearly knew more than she should. He exhaled slowly. "You said I'd lose my son," he repeated, "so tell me what I'm supposed to do." Eleanor didn't smile, she just gestured slightly towards the open door. "First," she said, "you get out of the rain." Darius hesitated for one last second, then slowly he stepped forward. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, the world shifted. Warmth wrapped around him instantly, a stark contrast to the cold outside. The door closed behind him with a soft, final sound, shutting out the storm. For a brief second, he just sat there, water dripping onto the floor mat, his body still tense, ready to react if something felt wrong. But nothing did. The car moved smoothly, merging back onto the highway like it belonged there. Darius stared straight ahead, his reflection faint in the darkened window. "You said this was planned," he said quietly. Eleanor folded her hands in her lap. "Yes," he swallowed. "Then what happens next?" She turned her head slightly, looking at him again. "That depends," she said, "on whether you're willing to stop playing the version of yourself she expects." Darius frowned. "And if I'm not?" Eleanor's voice didn't change. "Then she wins." The words settled into the quiet of the car, heavier than anything that had come before. Outside, the storm continued. Inside, something else was beginning. The car moved like it was untouched by the weather. Rain pounded the roof, streamed across the windows, blurred the world outside into streaks of gray and white. but inside everything felt controlled, quiet, almost unreal. Darius sat stiffly in the back seat, his clothes still damp, his body slowly thawing in the warmth. A thick wool blanket had been placed beside him at some point. He hadn't even noticed when, but he hadn't touched it yet. He wasn't ready to get comfortable, not here, not with her. The driver didn't speak. An older man in a dark suit, hands steady on the wheel, eyes forward like he'd done this 1,000 times. Like none of this was unusual. Darius glanced at him, then back at Eleanor. "You've been watching her," he said. It wasn't a question. Eleanor didn't answer right away. She adjusted one sleeve of her coat, precise, deliberate. "I've been watching a situation," she said finally. Darius let out a quiet breath through his nose. "That's not the same thing." "No," she agreed, "but it's close enough." The car passed under an overpass, the sound of the rain briefly shifting, louder, then softer again as they emerged on the other side. The city lights ahead flickered faintly through the storm. Charlotte, they were heading toward Charlotte. Darius leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing. "How long?" he asked. Eleanor turned her head. "How long what? How long have you been watching?" he clarified. A pause. 10 days, she said. Darius blinked. 10 days? He let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You don't even know me." Eleanor studied him carefully. "I know enough," she replied. "That's not how this works," he shot back. "You don't just follow someone's life for 10 days and decide you understand it." "I didn't decide," she said calmly. "I confirmed." The words landed with a quiet weight. Darius shifted in his seat, discomfort settling deeper. "Confirmed what?" Eleanor looked out the window for a moment, watching the blurred lights of passing cars. "That Angela met with a family attorney twice in the last week," she said. "That she toured a property in a different school district with a man named Damian Cross. And that tonight, she spent nearly 40 minutes in a parking lot before picking you up." Darius's heart skipped. "What?" He turned toward her fully now. "How do you know that?" "Because I asked someone to find out." The answer was simple. Too simple. Darius shook his head slightly, trying to process it. She told me we were meeting to talk about Malik," he said, more to himself than to her. Eleanor didn't respond, because she didn't need to. The silence said enough. Darius leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. "She's already planning to move him," he murmured. "New school, new place, new narrative," Eleanor finished. Darius's jaw tightened. He stared at the floor for a moment, the soft hum of the engine filling the space. "She wouldn't just take him," he said after a while. "Not without what?" Eleanor interrupted. Darius hesitated. "Without a reason," he said, though the words felt weaker now. Eleanor's gaze sharpened slightly. "She doesn't need a reason," she said. "She needs a story." Darius looked up at her. "And what story is that? That you're not enough?" The words hit harder than anything else she'd said, not because they were new, but because they weren't. Darius swallowed. He had heard it before, not always in those exact words, but close enough, in the way Angela talked about his job, in the way she talked about his apartment, in the way she talked about his future, or lack of one. "She's going to say I'm unstable," he said quietly. Yes. She's going to say I can't provide. Yes. That I don't have structure. That I'm inconsistent." Eleanor nodded once. Darius leaned back, staring out the window as the city grew closer. The buildings rose slowly out of the darkness, their lights glowing through the rain like something distant, unreachable. "I've been working," he said, almost defensively. "I've been doing everything I can. I'm sure you have." That should have felt reassuring. It didn't. Because it didn't change anything. Darius ran a hand over his face. exhaustion starting to creep in under the adrenaline. "She's going to twist everything," he said. "Every late payment, every missed call, every time I had to switch shifts. Yes! And it's going to look worse on paper than it really is?" "Yes." He let out a breath. "And I'm just supposed to sit there and let that happen." Eleanor didn't answer immediately. The car slowed slightly as it approached a red light. The glow reflected off the wet pavement, casting a dim red hue inside the cabin. "No," she said finally. Darius turned to her. "Then what?" Eleanor met his gaze directly. "You stop giving her exactly what she expects." He frowned. "And what is that?" Eleanor leaned forward just slightly. "A man who absorbs everything," she said. "Who waits. Who hopes that if he stays calm long enough, things will correct themselves." Darius didn't respond, because that was exactly what he had been doing. "She's counting on that," Eleanor continued. "She's counting on you reacting late, on you trying to fix things after the damage is already done." Darius's hands tightened together. "I didn't want to fight," he said quietly. "I know. I didn't want Malik caught in the middle. I know." He looked up at her, frustration flickering in his eyes. "Then what was I supposed to do?" Eleanor held his gaze. "You were supposed to see it sooner." The words stung, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. Darius looked away again, jaw clenched. The light turned green. The car moved forward. For a while, neither of them spoke. The city wrapped around them slowly, tall buildings, glowing signs, reflections shimmering across wet streets. People moved under umbrellas, quick and purposeful, like the storm was just another inconvenience in a life that kept going. Darius felt like he was watching it from the outside, like he didn't belong in any of it. "Why me?" he asked suddenly. Eleanor glanced at him. "What? Why are you doing this?" he said. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Eleanor didn't answer right away. For the first time, something shifted in her expression. Not much, just a flicker. But it was there. "Because I misjudged something," she said. Darius frowned. "What does that mean?" Eleanor looked out the window again. "It means I thought you would act sooner," she said. "I thought you would recognize what was happening and step in before it reached this point." Darius let out a quiet, bitter laugh. "Yeah," he muttered. "Well, I didn't, no," she agreed. The car slowed again, turning onto a quieter street lined with tall buildings and soft golden lights. Darius looked around, trying to get his bearings. "Where are we going?" he asked. Eleanor folded her hands again. "Somewhere you can dry off," she said, "and start thinking clearly." Darius hesitated. "That's it?" Eleanor turned to him once more. "That's the beginning." The car pulled up in front of a high-rise building, its entrance lit warmly against the dark, rain-soaked street. A doorman stepped forward immediately, holding an umbrella, opening the door with practiced ease. Darius didn't move at first. He sat there looking out at the building, at the life inside it that felt a world away from where he had been standing just minutes ago. From who he had been. "You can stay where you were," Eleanor said quietly behind him, "or you can step into what comes next." Darius closed his eyes for a second, then he opened the door and stepped out. The rain hit him one last time before the umbrella caught it. A doorman in a dark coat moved quickly, steady and practiced, shielding Darius from the downpour without a word. The transition was almost disorienting. One second he was drenched, cold, invisible on the side of a highway. The next, he was stepping onto polished stone beneath warm lighting that made the storm feel distant, unreal. Darius hesitated at the entrance. The lobby stretched wide in front of him, quiet and clean. Marble floors reflected soft golden light from overhead fixtures. A faint scent, something like cedar and citrus, hung in the air. Everything was still, controlled, untouched by chaos. It felt like stepping into someone else's life. He looked down at himself, wet shirt clinging to his skin, jeans darkened by rain, boots leaving faint watermarks behind him. He didn't belong here. But Eleanor didn't slow down. She walked forward with calm certainty, not looking back, as if she already knew he would follow, and after a second, he did. The elevator doors opened before they even reached them. The doorman gave a slight nod and stepped away. No questions, no hesitation. Darius stepped inside. The quiet hum of the elevator replacing the distant sound of rain. The doors slid shut. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The numbers climbed slowly. Darius leaned back against the wall, crossing his arms without realizing it. His body was still tense, still catching up to everything that had happened. "You bring a lot of people here?" he asked finally. Eleanor didn't look at him. "No." The answer came without explanation. Darius let out a short breath. "Figures." The elevator stopped. The doors opened into a private hallway. Soft carpet, dim lighting, no noise except the faint echo of their footsteps. Eleanor moved to a door at the end, unlocking it with a small, precise motion. Inside, the space opened up even more. A penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city below, glowing through the rain like a scattered constellation. The storm still moved across the skyline, but from up here, it felt distant, contained, a world below, a world above. Darius stepped inside slowly, his boots sinking slightly into the thick rug near the entrance. He didn't go far, didn't touch anything, didn't trust anything yet. "You can use the guest bathroom," Eleanor said, setting her gloves down on a nearby table. "There are clean clothes inside." Darius shook his head slightly. "I'm fine. You're not." He looked at her. "I didn't come here to get comfortable," he said. "I know. Then let's skip the part where I pretend this is normal." Eleanor turned to face him fully now. "This isn't normal," she said. "That's the point." The words settled between them. Darius stood still for a moment, then let out a slow breath. He ran his hands down his arms, trying to shake off the lingering cold. "Then stop talking around it," he said. "Tell me what I need to know." Eleanor studied him. For the first time since the highway, there was something different in her expression. Not softer, but more direct, like she had been waiting for him to say exactly that. "Angela is building a case," she said. Darius nodded once. "I got that part." "No," Eleanor continued. "You understand the idea. You don't understand the execution." Darius's brow furrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means she's not reacting to your behavior," Eleanor said. "She's shaping it." The words hit him harder than expected. "She's been creating situations," Eleanor went on, "knowing how you would respond." Darius shook his head. No, you're reaching." "Am I?" Eleanor walked toward the window, looking out over the city for a moment before continuing. "She schedules conversations when you're already exhausted," she said. "She raises concerns when you're distracted. She delays information just long enough that your response appears late." Darius felt his chest tighten. She changes pickup times," Eleanor continued, her voice calm, steady. "Then documents your delay. She initiates discussions when you're at work, then notes your lack of availability." Darius didn't respond, because he remembered all of it. The last-minute schedule changes, the texts that came in the middle of shifts, the conversations that always seemed to happen at the worst possible time. He had thought it was just life. Now it felt like something else. "She's controlling the timing," Eleanor said. "And when you respond the way you always do, calm, delayed, trying to avoid escalation, it reinforces the version of you she's building." Darius turned away, pacing once across the edge of the room. "That's not fair," he muttered. "No," Eleanor agreed. "It's effective." He stopped, ran a hand over the back of his neck. "She's going to say I don't show up," he said quietly. "Yes, that I don't prioritize him. Yes, that I'm inconsistent. Yes." Each word landed heavier than the last. Darius looked down at the floor, jaw tightening again. "I've been there," he said. "Every game I could make, every appointment I knew about. I believe you, but that's not what it's going to look like," he added. Eleanor didn't answer, because she didn't need to. Darius exhaled slowly, the weight of it pressing down harder now. "So what?" he said. "I just start fighting everything, every message, every change." "No." He looked up. "No, you start choosing what matters," she said, "and you stop reacting to everything else." Darius frowned. "That sounds like the same thing I've been doing." "It's not." Eleanor stepped closer now, her voice lowering slightly. "You've been avoiding conflict," she said. "That's not the same as taking control." The words settled deep. Darius didn't speak for a moment. He thought about every time he had backed off. Every time he had told himself it wasn't worth the argument. Every time he had chosen quiet over confrontation. He thought he was protecting something. Now he wasn't so sure. "What if I'm already too late?" he asked. Eleanor held his gaze. "You are," she said. The answer came without hesitation. Darius felt something drop in his chest, a hollow space, "But that doesn't mean it's over," she added. He looked at her again. That was new. "Then what does it mean?" he asked. "It means the next move matters more than everything that came before." Silence filled the room again. The rain tapped softly against the glass now, quieter at this height. The city lights flickered beneath it, steady and distant. Darius stood there, caught between two versions of himself. The one who had been trying to keep peace, and the one who was starting to understand what that had cost him. He swallowed. "What's the next move?" he asked. Eleanor didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for a folder resting on the table behind her. Thin, neatly organized. She held it out to him. Darius hesitated, then took it. Inside were printed pages, dates, notes, summaries. His eyes scanned quickly. Meetings, addresses, times. Angela's name appeared again and again. So did another, Damien Cross. Darius's stomach tightened. "Who's this?" he asked. Eleanor watched him. "Someone who benefits from you losing," she said. Darius's grip on the folder tightened. The room felt smaller now, more focused, more real. He looked back up at her. "You've known all this," he said slowly. "Yes, and you waited." Eleanor didn't deny it. Darius took a step forward. "Why?" The question hung there, heavy, necessary. Eleanor's expression didn't change. "Because I needed to know whether you were someone worth stepping in for," she said. The words landed hard, not cruel, but honest. Darius stared at her. Rain tapped against the glass. The city glowed below. And for the first time that night, the anger that had been building inside him shifted into something sharper, something clearer. "You got your answer?" he asked quietly. Eleanor held his gaze. Yes, a beat passed. Then Darius closed the folder. And for the first time since the highway, he didn't feel lost. He felt awake for the first time that night. The confusion had a shape. Darius stood in the center of the penthouse, the folder still in his hand, the city glowing behind him like something distant but reachable. The rain had softened into a steady whisper against the glass, no longer violent, but constant. Like a reminder, everything had changed, but nothing had been fixed. He looked down at his pages again. Dates, times, patterns. Proof that Angela hadn't just been reacting. She had been planning, carefully, quietly, and he had walked right into it. Darius exhaled slowly and closed the folder. "So what now?" he asked. Eleanor didn't answer immediately. She moved toward the kitchen area, poured a glass of water, and set it on the counter without drinking it. Her movements were calm, deliberate, like she was never in a hurry, because she never needed to be. "Now," she said, "you stop thinking like someone trying to catch up." Darius frowned slightly. "And start thinking like what? Like someone who can't afford to fall behind again." The words landed differently this time, not like criticism, like instruction. Darius nodded once, absorbing it. Then, a sudden sound cut through the quiet. A dull thud. Darius turned his head toward the window instinctively. "What was that?" he asked. Eleanor didn't move, but the driver, who had silently entered the apartment at some point, stepped closer to the glass and looked down. "Bus stop," the driver said quietly. "Looks like someone slipped." Darius stepped forward, his eyes scanning through the rain. Down below, near the edge of the building across the street, a dimly lit bus stop sat under a flickering light. A figure lay half-collapsed against the bench, one arm awkwardly twisted, rain soaking through thin clothing. No one else stopped. Cars passed. People hurried by under umbrellas, heads down, focused on getting somewhere warm. No one noticed, or no one wanted to. Darius didn't think. He was already moving. "Where are you going?" Eleanor asked, her voice calm but sharper now. "He's hurt," Darius said, already heading toward the door. Eleanor watched him for half a second. "You don't know that. I know enough." He didn't wait for permission. The elevator ride down felt longer than before, the hum louder, his heartbeat louder still. By the time the doors opened, he was already stepping out, pushing through the lobby and back into the rain. The doorman called something after him, but it didn't matter. Cold air hit him again, soaking him in seconds. But he didn't slow down. He crossed the street, dodging headlights, the wet pavement slick beneath his boots. The closer he got, the clearer it became. An older man, late 60s, maybe older, thin jacket. No umbrella. One shoe half off. Blood, not much, but enough, ran down the side of his forehead, mixing with rain. "Hey," Darius said, dropping to one knee beside him. "Hey, can you hear me?" The man groaned faintly. That was enough. Darius shrugged off what was left of his wet shirt, folding it quickly, pressing it gently against the man's head to slow the bleeding. "Stay with me," he said. "You're all right. Just stay with me." The man's eyes fluttered open for a second, unfocused. "Bus," he murmured. "Yeah," Darius said softly. "You'll catch the next one." He glanced around. Still no one stopping, still no one coming. Darius reached into his pocket out of habit, then remembered. Nothing, no phone. He clenched his jaw, scanning the street. A car slowed slightly, then kept going. Another passed. Time stretched. Rain fell. The man's breathing was uneven, shallow but steady. Darius adjusted his grip, keeping pressure on the wound. "You're not alone," he said quietly. "I got you." A moment later, he heard footsteps behind him, measured, unhurried. Eleanor. She stood a few feet away under a large black umbrella, the driver beside her holding it steady. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes were fixed on Darius. "You left without thinking," she said. Darius didn't look up. "Yeah," he replied. "You're already at a disadvantage," she continued. "Every move matters now, I know, and you still stopped." Darius finally glanced at her. He needed help. Eleanor studied him. "He's not your responsibility," Darius held her gaze for a second. Then he shook his head slightly. "That's not how it works." The rain filled the silence between them again. Eleanor didn't argue, didn't step closer, she just watched. After a few minutes, Distant sirens cut through the night. An ambulance pulled up, lights reflecting off the wet pavement. Paramedics moved quickly, taking over, asking questions. Darius stepped back, his hands stained, his shirt gone. "Stay with us, sir," one of them said to the older man. The man was lifted onto a stretcher, secured, taken inside, the doors closed, the ambulance pulled away. And just like that, it was over. Darius stood there in the rain, breathing hard, his chest rising and falling. He looked down at his empty hands, then up at Eleanor. She hadn't moved. For the long moment, neither of them spoke. Then she nodded once, subtle, almost imperceptible. "Get back in the car," she said. Darius hesitated. Not because he didn't want to, but because something inside him had shifted again. He walked back slowly, the rain washing over him, colder now, but somehow lighter. When he got back inside the car, the warmth felt different this time, not foreign, not distant, just there. He sat down, leaning back slightly, his body finally starting to register exhaustion. Eleanor watched him for a moment. Then she spoke. "That's why I waited." Darius turned his head. "For what? For that?" He frowned. "For helping someone? For not thinking twice about it?" Darius let out a quiet breath. "That's just what you do." Eleanor shook her head slightly. "No," she said. "That's who you are." The difference settled in. Heavy, important. Darius looked away, out the window, watching the city blur again, as the car moved. "And that's supposed to matter?" he asked. Eleanor's voice didn't waver. It already does. He didn't respond, but something inside him believed her. Outside, the storm continued. Inside, the rules were changing. And for the first time, Darius wasn't just reacting anymore. He was becoming something else. But becoming something new didn't mean he was ready. The next morning came too fast. The storm had passed, but the city still wore its aftermath. Streets damp, skies gray, puddles reflecting a world that felt slightly off balance. From the floor-to-ceiling windows of Eleanor's penthouse, everything looked calm, controlled, but Darius knew better. He stood near the window, dressed now in borrowed clothes that fit him a little too perfectly. Dark sweater, clean pants, shoes that didn't belong to him, but didn't feel uncomfortable either. He looked like a different man, but inside, the pressure was building. "Eat something," Eleanor said from behind him. A plate sat untouched on the kitchen island. Eggs, toast, coffee still steaming. Darius didn't move. "I'm not hungry." "You will be," she replied. "Just not right now." He let out a quiet breath, eyes still on the city. "What time is it?" he asked. 8:43. He nodded once. "They'll be filing today." "Yes," no hesitation, no false comfort. Darius turned slowly. "And we're just going to wait?" Eleanor met his gaze. "We're going to be ready." The difference mattered, even if it didn't feel like enough. By mid-morning, they were in a different building, glass and steel, clean lines, quiet hallways that carried the faint hum of fluorescent lights and distant conversations. A law office, Ethan Cole's office. Darius sat across from the desk, hands clasped, shoulders tight. The chair felt too soft, too forgiving for the weight in his chest. Ethan leaned back slightly, reviewing documents with a calm focus that didn't match the urgency Darius felt. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, no wasted movement, a man who didn't deal in emotions, only facts. "She filed early," Ethan said finally. Darius's stomach dropped. "How early? This morning?" Darius exhaled slowly, staring down at the edge of the desk. "She didn't waste time." "No," Ethan replied. "She didn't." Eleanor stood near the window, silent, observing. "What does it say?" Darius asked. Ethan slid a document across the desk. Darius hesitated before picking it up. Then he read, and with every line, Something inside him tightened. Unstable, inconsistent, financially unreliable, emotionally reactive. The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They were written cleanly, professionally, like facts, like truth. Darius's grip on the paper tightened. "That's not," he started, then stopped, because arguing with paper didn't change anything. Ethan watched him carefully. "She's not accusing you of being dangerous," he said. "She's accusing you of being unreliable." Darius looked up. "That's worse." Ethan nodded once. "It's more effective." Silence filled the room. Darius set their papers down slowly, his hands steady but heavy. "She left me on the side of the highway," he said. Ethan didn't react. "That's not in here." "No, she took my phone, my wallet, everything." Ethan folded his hands. "And what proof do you have of that?" Darius didn't answer, because he didn't have any. The realization hit him like a second impact. Everything that had happened last night, invisible, unprovable, useless in a courtroom. "She planned it," Darius said quietly. "I believe you," Ethan replied. "But believing it and proving it are two different things." Darius leaned back in his chair, the weight of it pressing down harder now. "So what happens next?" he asked. Ethan glanced at Eleanor briefly, then back at Darius. "There's a temporary hearing this afternoon." Darius's head snapped up. "Today? Yes, that's not enough time." "No," Ethan agreed. "It's not." The air in the room felt tighter, thicker. "What does that mean?" Darius asked. "It means," Ethan said, "she's trying to establish control early." Darius clenched his jaw. "And me, you're trying to keep up." The words landed hard, again, always just a step behind. The courtroom was smaller than Darius expected. Quiet, neutral, the kind of place where emotions didn't belong, even when they were impossible to ignore. He sat beside Ethan, his hands resting on his knees, fingers locked together. Across the room, Angela. She looked composed, calm, dressed but intentionally. Soft colors, no sharp edges, the picture of stability, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't left him in the rain. Darius felt something rise in his chest. Anger, not loud, not explosive, just steady, controlled. Angela glanced at him briefly, no smile, no acknowledgement, just a look that said everything she needed it to. This is how it's going to be now. Darius looked away first, not because he had to, but because he understood something now. This wasn't about what happened. It was about what could be shown. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The process began. The words moved fast, too fast. Legal language, structured arguments, statements that sounded polished and final. Angela's attorney spoke first, clear, controlled, prepared. "She has done everything in her power to provide stability," he said. While Mr. Coleman has demonstrated a pattern of inconsistency, Darius stopped listening, not because he didn't care, but because he already knew the story. He had seen it, read it, felt it, and now he was hearing it presented like fact. Ethan spoke next. Calmer, measured, he didn't argue everything. He chose his points carefully, but it wasn't enough, not today. Darius could feel it, before the judge even spoke. The decision came quickly, temporary, but heavy. Until further review, the judge said, visitation will be limited to scheduled, supervised contact. The words echoed, limited, supervised. Darius's chest tightened. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't react, because reacting now wouldn't change anything. Angela remained still, calm, composed, winning. Outside the courtroom, the hallway felt too bright, too normal. People walked past like nothing had happened, like lives weren't shifting in the space behind those doors. Darius stood near the wall, his hands at his sides now, no longer clenched. Just empty. Ethan stepped beside him. "This isn't the end," he said. Darius let out a short breath. "It feels like it. It's not." Darius nodded slightly. He didn't look convinced. Across the hall, Angela walked away without looking back. Her heels clicked softly against the floor. Steady, certain. Darius watched her go, and for the first time, he understood just how far behind he had been. Not because he didn't care, but because he had believed something that wasn't true. That doing the right thing was enough. He turned slowly. Eleanor stood at the end of the hallway, watching him, not stepping in, not offering comfort, just there waiting. Darius walked toward her, each step slower than the last. When he reached her, he didn't speak right away. He just looked at her. "They limited my time," he said finally. "I know." He swallowed. They didn't even hesitate. "No." Silence, then. "Made it look easy," he added. Eleanor held his gaze. "Because for her, it is." The truth settled in again, heavy but clear. Darius nodded once, then something shifted. Not in the room, in him. He straightened slightly, his shoulders squared. The exhaustion didn't disappear, the loss didn't vanish, but something else rose beneath it, something steadier. "This isn't over," he said. Eleanor's expression didn't change, but her eyes did. "No," she said quietly, "it's not." And for the first time since the rain, Darius believed it. But belief didn't make it easier. It didn't erase the sound of the judge's voice. Didn't erase the look on Angela's face as she walked out of that courtroom like she had already moved on to the next step. And it definitely didn't fill the empty space waiting for him when he got back home. The apartment felt smaller than he remembered. The hallway light flickered once before settling into a dull yellow glow. The familiar hum of the refrigerator buzzed through the silence, constant and low, like it had always been there, even when everything else had changed. Darius stepped inside slowly, closed the door behind him. For a moment, he just stood there, listening. There were no voices, no television playing in the background, no small footsteps running across the floor. Just quiet. He walked into the living room, his eyes moving over everything like he was seeing it for the first time. The worn couch, the chipped coffee table, the stack of unopened mail on the corner. Nothing had moved, but everything felt different. He walked toward the kitchen, and then he saw it. On the table. The project. A half-finished volcano made out of cardboard and glue, sitting crooked on a piece of construction paper. Red paint still sealed in its bottle. Baking soda in a small box beside it. Malik's science project. Darius stopped. His hand hovered over the back of a chair, but he didn't sit. He just looked at it. And suddenly, the room wasn't quiet anymore. It was filled with echoes. "Dad, it's supposed to erupt like a real one. I know. Just don't pour too much vinegar, all right?" But that's the best part. A small laugh. A moment that had seemed so ordinary when it happened. Darius reached out and touched the edge of the cardboard, still rough, still unfinished, like something that had been paused and never picked back up. He pulled the chair out slowly and sat down. His hands rested on his knees, and for the first time since the courthouse, he felt it. Not anger, not frustration, something deeper, regret, not because he hadn't cared, but because he had believed something that wasn't true, that staying calm, staying quiet, staying patient would somehow make everything work out. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table. His eyes stayed on the volcano. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he said quietly, the words barely louder than the hum of the fridge. There was no one there to hear it, but he said it anyway, because he needed to. His mind replayed moments he had ignored. Angela changing pickup times without warning. Angela sending messages while he was at work, knowing he couldn't respond right away. Angela speaking calmly while twisting every conversation just enough to make him sound like the one falling behind. And every time, He had stepped back, told himself it wasn't worth the fight, told himself Malik needed peace more than anything else. But now, he saw it differently. Peace hadn't protected his son. It had made things easier to control. Darius leaned back in the chair, staring up at the ceiling. A slow breath filled his lungs, then left just as slowly. "You let her write the story," he muttered to himself. The words hung in the air, heavy, true. He sat there for a long time. Long enough for the light outside to shift slightly, long enough for the quiet to stop feeling empty and start feeling like something else, a space, a pause. A moment before something changes, the phone on the counter buzzed. Darius turned his head. For a second, he didn't move, then it buzzed again. He stood, walked over and picked it up. A message from Ethan. "We need to move fast. Call me when you're ready." Darius stared at the screen. Then he set the phone down, not because he didn't care, but because, for once, he didn't want to react immediately. He walked back to the table, looked at the volcano again. Then, slowly, he reached for the box of baking soda, turned it over in his hands. Malik had been excited about this, had been waiting, and Darius had told him, "We'll finish it this weekend." That weekend never came, because something else always got in the way. Work, stress, arguments that never seemed to end. Darius set the box back down, his jaw tightened. "No more waiting," he said under his breath. "Not for the project, not for anything." The next morning came with a different kind of silence. Not empty, focused. Darius stood in the same kitchen, but he wasn't the same man who had walked in the night before. He had papers spread across the table now. Old receipts, printed emails, a notebook open, pen resting across the page. It wasn't much, but it was something. He picked up the pen. For a second, it hovered over the paper. Then he started writing. Dates, times, details, every memory he could pull together. Every moment that had once felt too small to matter, because now he understood. Those small things were everything. The mornings he made breakfast, the afternoons he picked Malik up from school, the nights he stayed up helping with homework after long shifts. They weren't just moments. They were proof, and for the first time, Darius wasn't trying to explain himself. He was building something, piece by piece, carefully, deliberately. Outside, the city moved like it always did. Cars passed, people rushed, life continued, but inside that small apartment, something had shifted. The quiet that once held regret, now held purpose. Darius paused, looking down at what he had written so far. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't polished, but it was real. He nodded once to himself, then picked up the phone. This time, he didn't hesitate. "Ethan," he said when the call connected. There was no uncertainty in his voice. Just clarity. "I'm ready." There was a brief pause on the other end. Then, "Good," Ethan replied. And for the first time since the rain, Darius wasn't catching up. He was stepping forward. The difference showed in the way he walked into Ethan Cole's office that afternoon. Not hesitant, not unsure, still tired, still carrying everything from the night before. But there was something steadier beneath it now. Something that didn't break as easily. Ethan looked up from his desk as Darius entered. He didn't say anything at first. He just watched him, noticing the shift. "Sit," Ethan said finally. Darius sat. This time he didn't sink into the chair. He sat upright, hands resting calmly on his legs. Ethan leaned forward slightly. "What do you have?" he asked. Darius pulled out a worn envelope and a small stack of papers, not organized. Not polished, just real. "Not everything," Darius said. "But it's a start." Ethan took the papers and began flipping through them. Receipts, printed emails, screenshots, dates scribbled in the margins. Darius watched him closely, waiting, not nervously, but with purpose. After a minute, Ethan nodded once. "This is good," he said. Darius let out a slow breath. "It doesn't feel like enough." "It isn't," Ethan replied. Darius didn't flinch. He nodded. "I figured." Ethan set the papers down. "But it's honest," he continued. "And that matters more than you think." Darius leaned forward slightly. "So what do we do with it?" Ethan reached for a legal pad, tapping his pen once against the edge. "We build a timeline," he said. Darius frowned slightly. "A timeline?" Ethan nodded. "Not arguments, not explanations, facts. Consistent, verifiable facts that show your involvement over time." Darius thought about that. "All the small stuff," he said. "Yes. The things that don't look important. They are now." Darius sat back slightly, the weight of that settling in. All the mornings, all the small moments, all the things he never thought to prove. Ethan slid the legal pad toward him. "Start here," he said. "Write down everything you can remember. School events, doctor visits, pickups, drop-offs, anything that shows consistency." Darius picked up the pen. For a second, he stared at the blank page, then he started writing. The hours blurred together. Names, dates, details. It didn't come out clean at first. Memories overlapped. Timelines clashed. But slowly, something began to take shape. A pattern, not perfect, but real. Ethan worked beside him, occasionally asking a question, occasionally pointing something out. When was his last dental appointment? Do you have proof of that payment? Who else was there that day? Each question forced Darius deeper into his own life, deeper into the truth he had never needed to organize before, because before, it had just been living. Now it was evidence. By evening, the table was covered. Papers spread out. Notes scribbled in every direction. Darius leaned back, rubbing his eyes. "I didn't realize how much there was," he said quietly. Ethan nodded. "Most people don't," he replied, "because they're not used to defending it." Darius looked down at the notes again. It wasn't just a list anymore. It was a story. His story. And for the first time, he wasn't letting someone else tell it. Later that night, Darius sat in a small cafe near his apartment. The kind of place with scratched tables and warm lighting that never quite reached the corners of the room. A cup of coffee sat in front of him, untouched. Across from him sat Andre Lewis, old friend, former co-worker, the kind of man who didn't waste words. Andre stirred his coffee slowly, listening as Darius finished explaining everything. The highway, the court, Eleanor of it. When Darius finished, Andre leaned back slightly, shaking his head once. "Man," he said quietly. Darius let out a tired breath. "Yeah," Andre studied him for a moment. "She didn't leave you out there just to hurt you," he said. Darius frowned. "What do you mean?" Andre pointed his spoon toward him. "She left you out there so you'd feel exactly what she wanted you to feel." Darius's brow tightened. "And what's that small?" Andre said. "Off balance, like you already lost." The words hit harder than Darius expected, because they felt right. Andre set the spoon down. "She wanted you reacting," he continued, "panicking, making mistakes." Darius looked down at the table. "I almost did." "Yeah," Andre nodded. "But you didn't." Darius let that sit for a moment. Then he looked up. "What if it's not enough?" he asked. Andre didn't hesitate. "It's not." Darius blinked. Andre leaned forward slightly. "But that don't mean you stop," he added. "It means you change how you move." Darius stared at him. "How?" Andre's expression sharpened slightly. "You stop trying to prove you're not a bad man," he said, "and you start showing them what a strong one looks like." Silence settled between them. Darius felt something shift again, not anger, not frustration, clarity. Andre leaned back again. "She's been writing the story," he said. Now you write yours. Darius nodded slowly. I am. Andre gave a small smile. Good. The next morning, Darius stood outside Malik's school. The building looked the same as always. Brick walls, faded lines on the pavement, kids running, laughing, backpacks bouncing behind them. Normal. But it didn't feel normal, not anymore. He waited near the entrance, hands in his pockets, watching. He wasn't supposed to be there, not officially, but he needed something. Proof, connection, something real. After a few minutes, a woman stepped out, mid-30s. Calm, observant. Ms. Tasha Miller, Malik's teacher. She spotted him immediately, paused, then walked over. Mr. Coleman, she said gently. Darius nodded. I won't take much of your time, he said. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. What do you need? Darius hesitated for just a second. Then, I need the truth, he said. Tasha's expression softened slightly. You're going to have to be more specific. Darius swallowed. Has anything changed? He asked. With Malik? Tasha didn't answer right away. She glanced back toward the school, then stepped a little closer. He's still doing well, she said carefully. But Darius's chest tightened. But what? Tasha met his eyes. He's more careful, she said. Darius frowned. Careful with what he says, she explained. Especially about home. The words hit him harder than he expected. Darius looked down briefly. He asked me something last week, Tasha continued. Darius looked up again. What? She hesitated. Then he asked if living in a small apartment meant his dad wasn't really his home. The world seemed to go quiet. Darius felt something tighten deep in his chest, a sharp, quiet pain. Tasha's voice softened. I told him home isn't about space, she said. It's about who shows up. Darius nodded slowly, but he couldn't speak. Because in that moment, he understood exactly what was at stake. Not just custody, not just time, but how his son saw him. Tasha watched him carefully. He talks about you, she added, in a good way. Darius swallowed hard. That matters, she said. Darius nodded again. Yeah, he said quietly. It does. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing, he said. Tasha waited. If it comes to it, would you be willing to say that? He asked. She didn't hesitate. Yes, Darius nodded. Thank you. He walked away slowly, the morning sun breaking through the clouds above him. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was losing ground. He felt like he was finally standing on it. But standing your ground doesn't mean the storm stops. It just means you're ready when it hits again. The email came late that afternoon. Darius saw the subject line before he even opened it. Emergency motion. Temporary custody adjustment. His stomach tightened. He already knew what was inside, but knowing didn't make it easier. He sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Malik's unfinished volcano still leaned slightly to one side. The light above flickered once, then steadied. Outside, traffic passed in low, distant hums. He opened the email, and there it was. Clean, organized, sharp. Angela's narrative, refined. Every sentence polished like it had been rehearsed a dozen times before it was ever written. Darius read slowly, then again, then once more. Each time the same realization sank deeper. She wasn't just telling a story. She was building a version of reality, one where he was always late, always unreliable, always just a little less. His fingers tightened around the edge of the table, not anger, not yet. Something colder. Recognition. She knew exactly what she was doing, and worse, she had been doing it for a long time. Darius grabbed his jacket and headed out without finishing the coffee he'd poured. The air outside was colder now, sharper, carrying the scent of wet pavement and something metallic. He needed to move, needed to think, needed to see it from somewhere else. He found himself at a small diner just off a side street, a place he and Andre used to stop at after late shifts. Nothing had changed. Same cracked vinyl booths, same soft hum of an old radio behind the counter, same tired waitress who didn't ask questions. Darius slid into a booth near the window. The glass was streaked with water from earlier rain, the outside world slightly distorted. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through the email again, this time slower, looking for patterns, looking for cracks, and then he saw it. Not in what she said, but in what she left out. There were gaps, moments missing, conversations trimmed, context removed. Angela hadn't lied outright. She had curated. Darius leaned back slowly, exhaling through his nose. "That's how you did it," he murmured. "Not with force, not with chaos, with control." The bell above the diner door chimed. Darius didn't look up at first. Then he heard the voice. "Didn't expect to find you here." He looked up. Eleanor. She stood near the entrance, coat neatly draped, completely out of place in the worn-down diner, and yet somehow not. Darius gave a small nod. "Didn't expect you to be looking." Eleanor slid into the booth across from him without asking. "I wasn't," she said. "I just know where people go when they need clarity." Darius gave a faint, humorless smile. "This place doesn't look like clarity." Eleanor glanced around. Clarity rarely does. Silence settled between them. Then Darius turned the phone toward her. "She filed," he said. Eleanor scanned the screen briefly. Her expression didn't change. "She refined it," she corrected. Darius frowned. "What's the difference?" "She already had the story," Eleanor said. "This is just the version she's ready to present." Darius leaned back, crossing his arms. "She left things out. Yes, she twisted the timing. Yes, and somehow it still sounds convincing." Eleanor looked up at him. "Because it's consistent." The word hung there. Consistent. Darius shook his head slightly. "I've been consistent," he said. "Have you documented it?" Eleanor asked. Darius didn't answer because he knew. That was the difference. Angela had documentation. He had memories. And in a courtroom, those weren't the same thing. The waitress dropped off a cup of coffee in front of Eleanor without asking. Eleanor didn't touch it. She just kept her eyes on Darius. "You're starting to see it," she said. Darius exhaled slowly. "Yeah, then say it." He hesitated. Not because he didn't understand, but because saying it out loud made it real. "Finally, she didn't just plan to win," he said. "She planned for me to lose." Eleanor nodded once. "That's closer." Darius looked back at the phone. "She knew I'd stay quiet," he added. "She knew I wouldn't fight everything. Yes. She knew I'd try to keep things calm. And she used that." Ellen didn't respond because she didn't need to. Darius let out a slow breath. Then something shifted. Not in the room, in him. "This isn't about what actually happened," he said. "It's about what can be shown." Eleanor's eyes sharpened slightly. "Now you're thinking correctly." Darius sat there for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone again, scrolled back through old messages, photos, emails, things he had already seen. But now, he saw them differently, not as moments, as evidence. He stopped on a photo, Malik, asleep on the couch, head resting against Darius's leg. The TV still on in the background, a blanket half draped over him. Darius stared at it. That wasn't just a memory, that was proof. He scrolled further, school emails, payment confirmations, appointment reminders, pieces, small, ordinary. But together, they told a story too, a real one. Eleanor watched him quietly. "You're starting to understand the difference," she said. Darius nodded slowly. "Yeah." He looked up at her. "But there's still something I don't get." Eleanor waited. Why now, he asked. Why show me all this now? Eleanor didn't answer right away. She took a slow breath. Then, because before now, she said, you weren't ready to hear it. Darius frowned. I was the one living it, yes, Eleanor said. But you weren't seeing it. The words landed hard. But they weren't wrong. Darius looked down again, then back up. And now I am? Eleanor held his gaze. Yes, a pause. Then, there's one more thing, she added. Darius leaned forward slightly. What? Eleanor reached into her bag and pulled out a thin folder. Placed it on the table. Darius looked at it, then at her. What is that? Eleanor didn't hesitate. Proof, she said. Darius's pulse quickened. He opened the folder. Inside, more documents, more notes, more names, but one stood out. Damien Cross, again, and beneath it, a line that made his stomach tighten. He'll fold under pressure. He always does. Darius stared at the words, then read them again. His jaw clenched. That's what she thinks of me, he said quietly. Eleanor didn't soften it. That's what she's counting on. The diner faded around him, the sound of the radio, the clink of dishes, the low hum of conversation. All of it disappeared, because in that moment, everything became clear. Angela wasn't just trying to win, she was waiting for him to give up. Darius closed the folder slowly. His hands were steady, but his eyes had changed. Then she's wrong, he said. Eleanor watched him carefully. Is she? Darius met her gaze. For the first time, there was no hesitation. No, he said. She's about to be. The storm had moved on, but something else had taken its place, and it wasn't quiet anymore. It was focused, it was sharp, and it was ready. But clarity doesn't make things easier. It just makes them unavoidable. Darius didn't go home right away. He drove, not far, not fast. Just enough to let the weight of everything settle into something he could carry. The streets were quieter now. The storm had passed, leaving the city washed clean but not changed. Neon signs flickered against wet pavement, reflections stretching long across the road like something trying to hold on to the night. He stopped at a red light and stared straight ahead. Angela's words echoed in his mind. Not the ones she said out loud, the ones she didn't, the ones Eleanor had shown him. He'll fold under pressure. Darius tightened his grip on the steering wheel. That was the version of him she believed in, the one who absorbed everything until he couldn't anymore, the one who stepped back, the one who disappeared quietly. The light turned green. Darius didn't hesitate this time. He drove. Ethan's office was still lit when he arrived. The hallway lights buzzed faintly overhead, the building mostly empty now. It felt different at night, quieter but somehow more honest. Darius pushed the door open and stepped inside. Ethan looked up immediately. I was wondering if you'd come back tonight, he said. Darius closed the door behind him. I wasn't done. Ethan studied him for a second, then nodded. Good. Darius stepped forward and placed the folder Eleanor had given him on the desk. Ethan opened it. His expression didn't change much, but his eyes slowed, focused. That's significant, he said after a moment. Darius leaned against the edge of the desk. She said it like it was nothing, he replied, like I was already out of the picture. Ethan closed the folder. She's not saying it to you, he said. She's saying it to herself. Darius frowned. What difference does that make? It means she believes it, Ethan said. And when someone believes their version of the story, they don't hesitate. Darius exhaled slowly. Yeah, I've noticed. Ethan leaned back slightly. Good, he said, because hesitation is the only thing that's been working against you. Darius didn't argue, because that part was true. They worked late, later than before. This time it wasn't about gathering, it was about shaping. Ethan reorganized everything Darius had brought in, turning scattered pieces into structure, a timeline, clear, precise, every detail placed where it belonged. "Don't explain," Ethan said at one point. "Show," Darius nodded. He understood that now. Explanation sounded like defense. Facts sounded like truth. At some point, Ethan slid a blank sheet of paper toward him. "You're going to write a statement," he said. Darius looked at it. "What kind of statement?" "Not a speech," Ethan replied. "Not something polished. Something real." Darius frowned slightly. Real doesn't always help. "It does," Ethan said, "if it's structured." Darius picked up the pen. For a moment, he just held it. Then, "What do I say?" he asked. Ethan didn't hesitate. "You tell the truth," he said, "including the parts that don't make you look perfect." Darius let out a quiet breath. "That's a risk," Ethan nodded. "So is pretending you're something you're not." Silence filled the room. Darius looked down at the blank page. Then he started writing. He wrote about the job he lost, about the shifts that changed without warning, about the nights he came home too tired to argue, too drained to fight. He wrote about choosing peace, about believing that staying calm would protect Malik, about the times he let things go because he thought it didn't matter. And then, he wrote the truth. That was a mistake. The words sat on the page, simple, uncomfortable, honest. He kept writing, about showing up, about mornings and homework and small moments that didn't look like much from the outside but meant everything, about being there, even when it wasn't perfect, even when it wasn't enough. By the time he finished, the room was quiet again. Ethan took the paper, read it once, then again. He nodded. "This works," he said. Darius leaned back slightly. "It doesn't feel strong." Ethan looked at him. "It's not supposed to feel strong," he said. "It's supposed to feel true." Darius let that sit, then nodded. The next morning came fast. Too fast. The sky was clear now, pale blue breaking through the last of the clouds. The city looked calm again, like nothing had happened. But Darius knew better. He stood outside the courthouse. The same steps, the same doors. But something inside him was different now. He wasn't here to react. He wasn't here to defend. He was here to stand. Eleanor stood nearby, a few steps back, not beside him, not in front, just present, watching, waiting. Darius didn't look at her. He didn't need to. He knew she was there. Ethan joined him at the steps. "You ready?" he asked. Darius took a breath. The air felt clearer than it had in days. "Yeah," he said. And this time, he meant it. Inside, the courtroom felt the same quiet, same structure, same controlled environment where everything mattered. Angela was already there. Of course she was. She looked the same as before, calm, prepared, certain, but something about it didn't hit the same way now, because Darius saw it for what it was, a performance, a controlled version of reality, and for the first time, he wasn't intimidated by it. He was ready to answer it. As the hearing began, the tension built slowly, not explosive, not loud, just steady pressure. Angela's attorney spoke again, confident, clear, reinforcing the same narrative. But this time, Darius didn't tune it out. He listened, carefully, because now he knew what to listen for, not just what was said, but what wasn't, the gaps, the patterns, the control. When it was Ethan's turn, everything shifted, not dramatically, not loudly, just precisely. He didn't argue everything. He didn't try to tear Angela's story apart. He just presented dates, records, patterns. And slowly, the narrative started to crack. Not break, not yet, but shift, just enough. Then it was Darius's turn. He stood, walked to the front, felt every eye in the room for a second. Then, he ignored it, because this wasn't about them. It wasn't about the judge. It wasn't even about Angela. It was about Malik. Darius took a breath and spoke. Not fast, not defensive, just clear. Yes, he said. "I've struggled." The words landed, no hesitation, no apology. "Yes, I've made mistakes. I thought staying quiet would keep things peaceful. I thought avoiding conflict would protect my son. A pause, then, I was wrong. The room stayed still. Darius didn't rush. I didn't stop showing up, he continued. I didn't stop caring. I didn't stop being his father. His voice stayed steady. I just stopped speaking up when it mattered. Another pause. Then, I'm not asking to be seen as perfect, he said. I'm asking to be seen as present. The words settled. Not dramatic, but real. And for the first time since all of this began, Darius wasn't defending himself. He was defining himself. Across the room, Angela's expression shifted, just slightly, but enough, because something had changed, and she felt it. The hearing continued. The pressure built. But this time, Darius didn't fold. He stood, and he stayed there. The silence that followed his words didn't feel empty. It felt heavy, not with judgment, with attention. The judge didn't speak right away. Papers shifted. A pen tapped once against the desk, then stopped. Across the room, Angela's attorney adjusted his posture slightly, preparing to respond. But something in the air had already changed. Darius felt it, not as victory, not yet, but as resistance, the kind that doesn't disappear. Ethan gave a slight nod from his seat. Stay steady. Darius didn't move. The rest of the hearing unfolded with a different rhythm. Angela's side pushed back. Of course they did. They questioned timelines, reframed delays, tried to reassert the same narrative, but now there was something to answer with. Not arguments, not emotion, evidence, patterns, consistency. Ethan guided it carefully, never raising his voice, never rushing. This record shows Mr. Coleman adjusted his work shifts to attend school events, he said at one point, sliding a document forward, another. And this confirms payment history. Delayed in some instances, yes, but always completed. The judge nodded once, eyes scanning the pages. Darius stood quietly. He didn't interrupt, didn't defend every point. He let the facts do what they were meant to do, speak. At one point, the judge looked directly at him. Mr. Coleman, she said, do you believe your current situation affects your ability to provide stability for your son? The question was simple, but loaded. Darius took a breath. Châteauaz, he said. No hesitation. A flicker crossed Angela's face, but Darius continued. It has, he added, and I take responsibility for that. The courtroom stayed quiet. But stability isn't just about money, he went on. It's about presence. It's about consistency. And I've been there. He didn't raise his voice, didn't rush. I didn't always handle things the right way, he said. But I never stopped showing up. The judge held his gaze, and for a moment, that was enough. The decision didn't come immediately. It never does. There were pauses, reviews, quiet conversations at the bench. Time stretched. Darius returned to his seat beside Ethan, his hands resting calmly now, not clenched, not shaking, just still. Angela sat across the room, her posture unchanged. But her eyes moved more now, less certain, more aware. The performance had shifted. Finally, the judge returned. The room stood, then sat again, papers aligned neatly on the desk. A breath. And then, based on the information presented, the judge began. The court finds insufficient evidence to support the claim that Mr. Coleman poses a significant risk to the child's well-being. Darius felt the words hit him slowly, not all at once. Piece by piece. Temporary restrictions on visitation will be lifted, she continued, effective immediately. A pause. And custody arrangements will be revised to reflect shared responsibility, pending further review. That was it. No dramatic shift, no overwhelming declaration, but everything had changed. Darius sat there absorbing it. Not a win, not complete, but not a loss anymore. Across the room, Angela's expression tightened, just for a moment. Then it was gone, controlled again. But Darius had seen it, the crack. Outside the courthouse, the air felt different, lighter, clear. The sky had opened fully now, sunlight breaking through in wide, soft beams that stretched across the city. Darius stepped down onto the stone steps, pausing for a moment. People moved around him, cars passed below. Life continued, but something inside him had settled. Ethan stepped beside him. "That was important," he said. Darius nodded. "I know, it's not over. I know." Ethan studied him for a second. "You handled that well." Darius looked out at the street. "I just told the truth." Ethan gave a small nod. "That's usually enough." He turned and walked off, already moving on to whatever came next. Darius stood there a moment longer. Then he felt it. That familiar presence. He didn't turn right away. He didn't need to. Eleanor stepped up beside him, her gaze following his out over the city. "You didn't fold," she said. Darius let out a quiet breath. "No," a pause. "She expected you to," Eleanor added. "I know." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Darius turned slightly toward her. "You knew this could happen," he said. Eleanor didn't deny it. "Yes, and you still waited." Another pause. "Yes." Darius studied her. "Not with anger, not anymore. Just understanding. You needed to see if I'd stand up," he said. Eleanor met his gaze. "Yes," Darius nodded slowly. "Guess you got your answer." Eleanor's expression didn't change, but her voice softened. Just slightly. "Yes." 2 days later, the room was small, plain, neutral, soft colors on the walls, like someone had tried too hard to make it feel safe. A supervised visitation room. Darius stood near a shelf filled with board games and worn stuffed animals. His hands were at his sides, but his fingers moved slightly, restless. He hadn't felt this nervous in the courtroom, not even close, because this mattered more. The door opened. Darius turned. Malik stepped in, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes wide, uncertain. For a second, he didn't move. He just stood there looking, like he needed to make sure this was real. Darius dropped to one knee. Didn't say anything at first. Didn't rush it. Then Malik ran, straight into him, arms tight around his neck. Darius caught him, holding on just as tightly. The world narrowed down to that one moment, that one feeling. "I thought you left," Malik whispered against his shoulder. Darius closed his eyes, held him tighter. "I didn't go anywhere," he said softly. "I'm right here." Malik pulled back just enough to look at him. "Promise?" Darius met his eyes. Clear, steady. "I promise," Malik nodded once, like he was storing it, like he needed it to last. Darius rested his forehead gently against his son's, and for the first time, everything else faded. The court, the storm, the fight, all of it, because this was what remained. The room was quiet again. Not empty, not heavy, just still. Darius sat at the small table in his apartment 2 days later, watching Malik carefully pour baking soda into the cardboard volcano. His son's tongue peeked out slightly in concentration, brows furrowed like the entire world depended on getting this part right. "Easy," Darius said gently. "Not too much." Malik nodded, adjusting his grip. "I know, Dad. I remember." That word lingered. Dad. Simple. But stronger now. Darius leaned back slightly in his chair, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the space again, just like before. The apartment hadn't changed. The walls were still worn. The table still leaned a little to one side, a folded piece of cardboard tucked under one leg to keep it steady. Nothing looked different, but everything felt different. Malik looked up at him. "Are you going to do the vinegar part?" Darius smiled slightly. "The best part, right?" Malik grinned. "Yeah." Darius reached for the bottle, unscrewing the cap slowly. He paused for just a second, looking at the volcano. at the project that had once sat unfinished, forgotten under the weight of everything else. Then he poured. The reaction came fast, for foam rose up, bright red and bubbling, spilling over the edges and sliding down the cardboard sides like a real eruption. Malik laughed, loud, free. The sound filled the apartment in a way that pushed everything else out. Darius laughed too, not because it was funny, but because it was right. Because for a moment, nothing else mattered. Later that evening, the light shifted through the window, soft and warm, casting long shadows across the floor. Malik had fallen asleep on the couch, one arm draped over a pillow, the TV still flickering quietly in the background. Darius stood in the kitchen, leaning lightly against the counter, watching him. He didn't move, didn't rush, just stayed there, like he said he would. The phone buzzed once on the counter beside him. A message. He glanced down. Eleanor. Heard about the decision. You handled it well. Darius stared at the screen for a moment, then typed back. You didn't have to step in. The reply came faster than he expected. No, but I chose to. Darius hesitated. Then, why? A pause. Longer this time, then the message appeared. Your father did the same for me. Darius's brow tightened slightly. He read it again, then once more. The words didn't feel dramatic, didn't feel like a reveal, but they landed deeper than anything else. He typed slowly. I don't understand. The response came in pieces. Years ago, your father warned my family about a financial situation we didn't see coming. He didn't have to. He didn't benefit from it. He just saw something wrong and chose to act. Darius felt something shift in his chest. A memory flickered. His father's hands, always rough from work, always steady. The quiet way he paid attention to things other people ignored. He swallowed. He never told me that. Another pause. He wouldn't have, Eleanor replied. That's the kind of man he was. Darius looked over at Malik again, at the small rise and fall of his chest, at the way he held onto things, even in sleep. So this, Darius typed, this was about him. The reply came slower this time. It started that way. Another message followed. But it's not anymore. Darius stared at that, then looked down at his hands. Still, steady, no shaking, no hesitation, just present. A week passed. Life didn't become perfect. Bills still came. Work still demanded more hours than he wanted to give. The apartment still felt small, but the difference wasn't in the outside. It was in how Darius moved inside it. He didn't wait anymore, didn't delay, didn't assume things would fix themselves if he stayed quiet long enough. He spoke, he documented. He showed up, not louder, not aggressively, just clearly. One afternoon, a familiar car pulled up outside. Not the Rolls-Royce, something simpler. A dark sedan. Darius stepped outside, closing the apartment door behind him. Eleanor stood near the curb. No driver this time, no formality, just her. She looked slightly different without the distance, less untouchable, more real. Darius walked toward her. You didn't have to come, he said. Eleanor gave a small, almost amused look. You keep saying that. Darius shrugged slightly. Still true. Eleanor glanced up at the building, then back at him. How is he? She asked. Darius's expression softened. He's good, a pause. And you? She added. Darius thought about that. Really thought, then nodded once. I'm getting there. Eleanor studied him for a moment, then nodded. That's enough. They stood there in quiet for a second. No pressure, no expectation. Then Darius spoke again. You waited, he said. Eleanor met his gaze. Yes. You could have told me sooner. Yes. Darius let out a small breath. But then I wouldn't have understood it, he said. Eleanor didn't respond, but she didn't need to. Darius nodded slowly. I get it now. Eleanor's expression shifted slightly, just enough. Good. She turned to leave, then paused. One more thing, she said. Darius waited. Don't confuse kindness with silence again. The words settled deep, not as a warning, as a reminder. Darius nodded. I won't. Eleanor gave a final nod, then got into the car. The engine started. The car pulled away. No drama, no lingering, just gone. Darius stood there for a moment, watching the street, listening to the quiet. Then he turned, walked back inside. Malik looked up from the floor where he was building something new, pieces scattered, ideas still forming. Who was that, he asked. Darius smiled slightly. Someone who knew your granddad, he said. Malik nodded like that was enough, because sometimes it is. Darius stepped further into the room. The light was warm, the space was small, but it was theirs, and this time, he wasn't waiting for it to fall apart. He was building it, one moment at a time. Some people think strength is loud, that it shows up in control, in power, in always having the upper hand. But that's not always true. Sometimes, strength is quieter. It's the man who stays when walking away would be easier. It's the father who shows up again, even after being pushed out. It's the choice to stand. Not because you're certain you'll win, but because you know what matters. Darius Coleman had been underestimated, dismissed, nearly written out of his own story, but he didn't disappear, he didn't fold, he didn't stay silent. And in the end, that made all the difference. Because kindness doesn't make you weak. It just means you have something worth protecting. And when you finally choose to protect it, that's when everything changes. When Darius knelt in that quiet room and held Malik as his son whispered, I thought you left. Nothing else mattered anymore. Because in that moment, he proved he never did. The truth is, being a good man isn't always enough if you stay silent while someone rewrites your story. Darius didn't win because he was perfect. He won because he finally chose to stand up and be seen. So next time life puts you in a place where staying quiet feels easier, don't. Speak up, show up, and protect what matters. Just like Darius did when everything was on the line. If this story touched you, comment 1 below and tell me, have you ever stayed silent when you should have stood up for yourself? There's another story coming next. And this one might hit even closer to home.